Hello, everyone. My name is Jordyn Smith, and I am the voice and the astrologer of this YouTube channel, Nonconformist Conscience. I haven't seen y'all in about a week and a half, so it's been a while for me. So I'm happy to be back on here. I do want to say that if you're a Leo, my birthday special is going on, and you have until the 20th to book. You can book for a date after that, but it does need to be booked by the 20th of August. And it is my birthday special. So for those of you who are new on this channel, that means that it is a $75 natal reading. My dog's back there, sorry. It is a $75 natal reading that includes us, yes, going over your natal chart, but also your solar return, so you understand what could be coming up for you for this next year. It is a 90-minute reading that is done over Zoom with me, and I record it and I send it back to you. So this video, let's jump into it. There's a couple of things I want to talk about. First off, I want to talk about Mercury retrograde. I want to talk about how this is happening on the Leo new moon, and then how on that Leo new moon, just a few hours later, that Venus enters the sign of Virgo. So there's a bit to talk about. I will show you the chart for this Leo new moon whenever I get to it. But for now, let's talk about Mercury and Virgo retrograde. So Mercury is going to station retrograde on the 4th of August, so this weekend. And it is going to be retrograde until the 28th, until it stations direct. On the 14th of August, though, it's going to re-enter the sign of Leo. So this is really interesting to think about, considering that we also have this Leo new moon that is happening when Mercury stations retrograde. So let's talk about Mercury as an archetype, then let's talk about Mercury and Virgo as an archetype, and then let's talk about Mercury retrograde as an archetype. So Mercury is about how we classify things. If you want to understand the type of learning style that you have, look in your natal chart, see where your Mercury's at, take the house first, and then you can see the sign that it's in that's conditioning that placement, and then you look at all of the aspects that it's making. Or I love looking at the phases of the aspects because that gives a lot more information. As an example, I will utilize my own chart. I have Mercury in the 9th house. I am someone who definitely thinks in concepts, has been learning a lot about my own personal truths. A Mercury, it's also what we call an oblique retrogradation because it's aspecting my Jupiter that is retrograde. So that's something that I might make for another video sometime. But okay, my camera kind of blinked out on me. I have this in my house, and so this is a little bit different for me. But anyway, so my Mercury is what we call an oblique retrogradation. So, and it's in the 9th house. So there's this emphasis on going within and using the intuition. And also growing up for me, and most people who have Mercury retrograde in their chart, they typically don't learn the same way that other people learn. It's because it's really indicative of in prior lifetimes of taking in way too much knowledge, and there's a need to throw off what's not pertinent for their learning in this lifetime. So that's why you see a bunch of kiddos who have Mercury retrograde struggle in school with staying focused, or having a desire to learn what it is that they're being taught, because it might not be pertinent to their soul's journey. So my Mercury, 9th house, love to expand upon my knowledge, my inner knowledge. My Mercury is also in Capricorn, so it's a lot about me speaking my personal truth and having my own personal voice of authority. For me, a lot of it's been within my own family systems, or with like karmic relationships with other people that I might have been family members with in a prior lifetime. So that's one way you can look at Mercury in your chart. It really emphasizes how you're going to classify information and the way in which you're going to learn or to study. For me, it's really about structuring my life, Capricorn, around my truths and speaking them, right? It's kind of this ninth house Capricorn dynamic. So that kind of covers what Mercury is in the chart. There's always this kind of misconception that Mercury has to deal with listening to others, and that's more of a Venus function. And I do want to point that out. And it's really good for me to point this out because later on in this video, I'm going to be talking about Venus's ingress into the sign of Virgo. So now we have Mercury in the sign of Virgo, and this is really about wanting to, it's in one of its favorite signs besides Gemini, but whereas Gemini is about collecting and gathering data, Mercury in Virgo is about discerning it. It's why it's a yin energy. It's an energy that's internalized. So it's the information that we've been gathering, the data that we've been gathering or classifying or learning about, and all of these things. Now it's taken inward and it's used in a way that is internalized to synthesize in order to improve upon it. Virgo has a really big affiliation with self-improvement or improving. It also is about purging certain dynamics. So while Mercury is in Virgo, for some of us, we could be wanting to purge some of the information that we've overtaken. Like maybe you're someone who likes to scroll through social media and gets stuck in like a loop of watching videos or something, and you're just inundated with information. Mercury and Virgo can really be saying, hey, let's stop this and let's start to analyze and to have discernment. That's a huge thing with Virgo. Have discernment about the intake of information that we are being attracted to and what we're wanting to consume. It's very analytical in this sign. It wants to analyze everything. It can have the mind pretty chatty, I would say, and the thinking, because it's wanting to improve upon something. So there can be a bit more of criticalness, inward critical. But also the thing that I forgot to mention about Mercury is that it's also about how we communicate. And so this is where we need to really discern how and what we want to communicate at this time, and maybe to improve upon our communication, especially the past couple of moons that we've had, where communication has been a really big thing. And communication is going to be a really big theme with this new moon coming up in Leo as well. But it's about improving upon, how are you articulating yourself? Are you able to communicate what is going on inside of you? What is it that you're wanting to communicate? How can you better communicate it? Did it come across as critical? Are you being overly critical of yourself? Mercury and Virgo can have us ruminating a lot, right? Like, I had this conversation and I didn't get to say what I wanted to say to this person, or I have seen people with Mercury and Virgo. Also, they like to sometimes have conversations with themselves when no one's around, because they feel safe. Maybe they didn't feel like they could say what they needed to say to someone out of fear of um, persecution or judgment. And so they'll tend to have like the conversation with themselves sometimes as a way to act it out and to express it. This could be something that you find yourself doing throughout this transit. But then also when we take a Mercury and Virgo retrograde, as I said, it's stationing retrograde on the 4th. There can be a lot of reliving, re-experiencing certain conversations, or going back to types of thinking or knowledge that we've taken in as a way to resolve something. Maybe we didn't communicate something the way that we needed to or wanted to. Maybe we were too critical of someone and we want to atone for it. Maybe we are finding that our communication style is more attacking than it should be. And so we're wanting to do the Virgo thing and to communicate an apology. The list goes on, but there can be a relive, redo, resolve dynamic. But the other thing that I really want to emphasize, when Mercury is retrograde, it more or less emphasizes more of the right brain. Whereas Mercury is very linear and logical and left brain. Whenever Mercury is retrograde, it's wanting us to tap into our intuitive nature more fully. So there can be a lot revolving around the need to improve upon our ways in which we think and communicate through utilizing our intuition. It's also what I would call Gnosticism. Well, not Gnosticism like in a Christian form, but like having inner gnosis, right? Um, through the intake of whatever externalized information that we have, whether it be from learning or observing or the conversations we've had, there can be an immense amount of analyzing and discerning in order to have gnosis, in order to understand or have the aha moments of this is what this lesson was for, this is why I experienced this, or, um, you know, maybe I'm coming into awareness now that I about what the truth of something is. Well, ultimately, Mercury and Virgo, while retrograde, is getting us to improve upon these skills. On the 14th, whenever Mercury ingresses, well, not ingresses, but retrogrades back into Leo, we can be re-experiencing feelings of wanting to be seen and heard and needing to understand why and where that learning came from or why we feel that way. Um, it's going to be ruled by the sun in Leo still whenever it re-enters the sign of Leo. So this can be where we're re-experiencing maybe conversations that we do need to have again, that maybe we weren't really in self-love or self-dignity or self-respect. Maybe we were um, not being on the receiving end of attacks or judgments, but maybe we were the one who was doing that to someone else, and needing to understand that that really comes from a place of fear and inner criticism and the need to be seen and heard, and the fear around maybe not being seen or heard because we didn't know what to ask for or how to communicate that in the past. So this will really give us all an opportunity to understand these dynamics and to induce some humility for some of us. There's an experience that I feel like is pretty universal. If you're on this channel, I'm gonna be willing to bet that you've had this, where you put your foot in your mouth. Maybe you say something that you shouldn't have, or that it wasn't said responsibly or in an integral way. And so the guilt that comes from that later on, that's a form of inducing self-humility. So there can be a lot of lessons around that and self-love and self-respect, but being very responsible with the ways in which we communicate what it is we need to communicate. And then, like I said, on the 28th, it will station direct, and it will station direct in the sign of Leo, and then it will go back over those degrees in Leo and re-enter the sign of Virgo. And so we'll get to improve some more from the lessons that we took in during this retrograde cycle. So I wanted to speak to that. The other thing that I do want to speak to for just a minute is when Mercury re-enters the sign of Leo, on the 14th, that is the day that we have the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Virgo, in Gemini, which is going to be ruled by that Mercury. And I am definitely going to make a video about this here in the next week or so to really tap into this for all of us. But I want you to keep that in your mind, that this retrograde season is heavily influenced with the need to intuit, to have inner gnosis, to have discernment, to have self-love, to have self-respect, to have self-dignity, and to expand upon our own inner knowledge, especially with Mercury in Virgo and then going back into Leo. It is this need to improve upon these functions that I've been speaking about and to align our will with this expansive process. Because the dynamic is that we don't know everything. And this retrograde season can really be confronting us with what little we do know, what we once thought that we knew that we really don't anymore, and the need to improve upon that and to self-actualize through that humility and through looking at what it is we do want to expand upon. Again, I will go over more of that in the next week. I won't be taking a break like I did for quite some time. I got really busy with clients and I needed to focus on that before I could do another video. But let's talk about your new moon. And then I will talk about Venus entering Virgo. So whenever I pull up this chart, I want you to know that here in America, this is happening on the 4th. It's happening, pretty early in the morning on the 4th. But the chart that I'm pulling up is from Greenwich, England, and this is because I want to be able to utilize the houses as well and not just the signs. So let me pull this up and show you all. So a couple of things I want to point out, and hopefully if I annotate this, it's not going to do anything weird like last time. A couple of things to note is one, this Mercury, two, this Venus. Oh, it's not doing anything funky. Okay, yay. And also, I want you all to look at this Pluto, which is ruled by Uranus and is square to this Venus. Okay? Now we can talk about what this new moon is, and then we're going to funnel in some of that information that I just pointed out to you. But I want you all to keep this in your mind. So, new moons are indicative of a brand new cycle. It's a 6-month cycle that brings up all of the emotional dynamics that we're wanting to work with and utilize pertaining to the archetypes of this new moon. And yes, this is a Leo new moon, but it's also in the 10th house, okay? So it's in this 10th house. And the 10th house is very Capricornian. It is about how we show up in the world. It's about being a natural role model and stepping outside of our own inner status quo, having a personal voice of authority. It's about integrity, meaning you walk your talk, right? It's about having what's going on the inside match the outside. And this new moon is in Leo. So it's about our self-actualization, our self-love, our self-respect. And so we can put these two archetypes together and really say that this new moon is going to be a 6-month period for us to be in our own authority. And through doing so, that it is an act of self-love and self-respect. And it is about our self-actualization, who you want to be in the world. How do you want to share yourself? Is it going to be in love, or is it going to be in a more flamboyant, look at me, um, non-humble way. This is about when Leo is expressed naturally, it is very much about taking the bull by the horns and getting after it through the strength of your own will, but doing it, seeing as this is in the 10th house, in an integral way. Okay. I also want you guys to look at that this midheaven that the new moon is in Cancer. So this moon is ruling the house that it's in, but Cancer is conditioning this heavily. So part of this is about the need to really embody and get into the emotions of what's going on. What emotionally can you self-actualize? What do I mean by that? How can you emotionally mature, 10th house, through loving yourself, through being your own mother and father? How can you show up in the world and be a natural role model? Would that be being Leonian and mirroring that to other people? Absolutely. Just walking your talk and being a person whose insights reflect their outsides. This is this new moon. It's saying what inside of you needs to have a maturation process. And part of that maturation process, we can look at this chart and see what this Leo new moon is wanting us to self-actualize through that. We have Pluto in the 4th house. It is conditioned by Capricorn as well, but it's in Aquarius, ruled by this Uranus and Taurus, okay? So there is this continuation of the need to liberate from any type of emotional dependencies where we're giving our Capricornian authority away, maybe to others, and not having a personal voice of authority or not showing up the way that we should be. Maybe we're making ourselves smaller and there's a need to, yes, have humility, but to know that it's okay to take up space, that each person has a place in the world and it's just as equal to everyone else's. And there's something about, I'm going to stop this share and then I'll pull this back up. There's something about whenever we understand that and we're able to nurture that within us and like love on ourselves, this Leo kind of quality, that we don't need to be attached to any type of external source anymore, that we can be very self-sufficient and self-reliant. And that is part of Uranus being that Pluto's ruler in the sign of Taurus. It's in the 8th house in that chart. I'll pull it up in just a sec. So it's not only part of the secret to this new moon, and what it's trying to let us know and reflect to us is, yes, emotional maturation, a need to liberate from what no longer serves you, what you've over-identified with, especially conditioning. If that conditioning has affected your sense of inner authority, are you able to ask and answer your own questions? But all of these things I'm speaking to really when you have self-mastery over them. And when I think of self-mastery, I do think of Capricorn, the 10th house, and Saturn. When one has self-mastery over these dynamics, they are self-reliant. They don't need anyone else. They will attract something that's just as self-reliant as them, and thus codependency doesn't have to exist anymore, right? And that's kind of pulling in the South Node in Libra. Again, the extremes that could be playing out. But this is really a full moon, a new moon that is speaking to how do you want to show up in the world? How can you present yourself in the world? Is the inside going to match the outside? You know, or are you going to be duplicitous, Gemini? Are you being self-reliant? Are you being integral in your actions? The other thing I want to share with you guys is when it comes to having a personal voice of authority, this Virgo is wanting us, this Mercury and Virgo is wanting us to improve upon this, to liberate from needing to be seen or heard in a way that creates extremes. Meaning that if our value is coming from the conversations we have and whether or not someone agrees with us, there can be room for improvement. because sometimes just speaking what we need to speak is an act of self-love, and it can be very healing, especially when we're not attached to the outcome of what it is that we are wanting or needing to say. It's not, I'm going to say this to someone as a form of control. It's more of Virgo, I'm going to say this as a form of self-improvement so that I can heal myself and I'm not making myself small or submissive, Virgo, to someone else. So there can be a lot of lessons through self-actualizing and having one's own personal voice of authority or being a natural role model, but the need to improve upon how you're communicating, if you're submitting to someone else's will or their authority. How can you stay in your own authority in a responsible way that's not overreactionary? So, and are you identified with an outcome? Are you attached to an outcome? This South Node here, which is trine Mars, is about culminating these dynamics and learning new processes of communicating that are not correlated to the attachment of the outcome. Again, going back to this new moon in the 10th house and Pluto in the 4th being conditioned by Capricorn, there is an immense amount of self-maturation that can happen over the next 6 months. But there are cycles and extremes that are wanting to end. This is also a new moon that is indicative of being able to ask for what you need. Are you someone who holds resentment because someone isn't able to give you what you need? On the flip side, are you able to tell them, or are you able to speak about how you're feeling, or maybe they've bothered you? Again, this goes back to this theme of having a personal authority that's not authoritarian, right? And about self-actualizing through this act of self-love, of just speaking about this, talking about, communicating. So much room for personal improvement through communication. That Venus in the 11th house in this chart, and you can go back and look at this if you want and screenshot it, but it's at the anaretic degree in Leo. It is ruled by the sun that is conjunct this moon. So there is a lot of lessons in, again, self-love, being in one's own authority, communicating in an impeccable way, improving upon your impeccability in your communication style, how you show up in the world. And it's dealing with all types of relationships, seeing as that Venus rules that South Node. And Venus and Leo in the 11th house can really be about showing up for everyone, right? In a loving way, but maybe needing to be liberating oneself from the need to be acknowledged. If we're in our own authority, we don't really need to be acknowledged. We can acknowledge ourselves, and that feels really good because we're not outsourcing our value. So a lot in that chart that is indicative of, yes, it's Leo, but it's super indicative of these Capricornian Cancerian dynamics. And just remembering that part of showing up in the world in order for other people to be able to hear or to understand that there's unity and diversity, that would be that Mars trining and Jupiter somewhat trining the South Node in Libra, that one needs to be able to communicate and have their own personal voice of authority, to have confidence. Think about it whenever someone walks into the room and they're not overcompensating with confidence. It's not like egomania, right? It's just like this natural humility, but there's a natural authority coming from it that we can feel that off of another person. We can feel whenever they're not being judgmental or trying to persecute or to be authoritarian. They're just simply speaking what needs to be spoken. A great example of some of the people that I can think of that actually have Mercury and Leo. President Obama was one. He was able to command a room without needing attention or recognition. He had a message that he wanted to share, and he was able to do it by just standing in his own inner sense of authority, right? Without trying to um, overimpose or be authoritarian, which is very in contrast to some of the other world leaders that we have seen in our lifetime, where we can look back at even before we were here. It was very different, right? There's just a different sense of commanding. It commands attention naturally without needing to be seen. So this is a 6-month period of emotionally maturing through these types of dynamics. I want to get to Venus entering the sign of Virgo just a little bit after this new moon, okay? Because it's going to be pulling in the energy of this new moon. If we're thinking about all of these dynamics that that I've been talking about, Venus and Virgo through transit is a little bit different than Venus and Virgo in someone's natal chart, but Venus and Virgo in transit is really about getting us to confront where we have illusions or delusions about our inner relationship, our beliefs, because our beliefs affect our inner relationship. It's also about improving upon our relationships with others, and the delusions or the ideals around that. Venus and Virgo through transit is absolutely wanting us to align ourselves with our truth. Um, and so there's lessons in improving upon that. That's why throughout this transit, some of us can be feeling more critical of ourselves because there's something that's wanting to self-improve upon, right? That's anyone with a lot of Virgo will feel that within them. They'll be kind of inwardly cynical or inwardly critical, and it's because something doesn't feel quite right and they're wanting to fix it. As someone who has Virgo in their chart, um, for many, many years, I only felt good whenever I was finding something within myself to fix. Not that I don't still do that, but I don't get the same value out of it anymore because it's more constructive instead of damaging. Okay, is the point that I want to make. Venus and Virgo can confront you with whether or not how you're treating yourself or others could be damaging through criticism, being critical, overly critical. And the best way to improve is through taking it one step at a time in a very Virgo-like fashion. This is also where you might want to be careful about what you're filling your time with. Are you overworking? Are you mindlessly chattering with your friends? Are you keeping yourself busy all the time and not really doing what it is that you need to be doing as a way to self-improve? If so, that's can be really indicative of being afraid of facing some type of inner void. And so that's something that I want us all to watch out for, to be consciously aware of. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to happen to everyone, but it can happen to some of us. And I like to, I think it's interesting. This is an interesting concept. And I think that it's on par for this Venus and Virgo transit, especially with Mercury retrograding and starting its retrograde cycle in the sign of Virgo as well. And there's an immense amount of how we communicate with others, how we communicate with ourselves, how we express ourselves, the need to self-improve, the need to emotionally mature. But so often we think of emotions as in a very fragmented way, either like, or black or white thinking. They're either good emotions or they're bad emotions, right? So like, anger is bad, right? That's like most people would typically agree with that. Anger is not a good emotion. Sadness is a bad emotion. All of these things that if it doesn't make you feel good, then it must be bad. And Venus and Virgo, if we're self-improving upon our inner relationship to self, which segues into our other relationships that are external. To have healthy external relationships, we need to have a healthy internal relationship to self. Venus and Virgo, a really great practice for this is to just understand that whatever emotion you're experiencing is neither good nor bad. This is also incredibly helpful for the new moon in Leo, because Leo, whenever it's not naturally expressed, can tend to have exclusionary type of dynamics to it and fragmentation. And the lesson with Leo is that things are equally good and important as they are as unimportant, and we can take that a step further to how we experience emotions. They are all equal. They're not really good or bad. They just are what they are. And the way that I like to think about some of the more uncomfortable emotions that we experience and could be throughout Mercury's retrograde cycle and Venus and Virgo is that those are the emotions that are going to get you to self-improve. They are like the key to unlocking a door, that there's something behind there that needs to be analyzed, Virgo, and investigated in order to experience it in a deeper way, in order to have that inner gnosis, that inner knowing of what it is that one needs to do and what is the necessary action to take, right? Um, so I like working with my uncomfortable emotions. Uh, of course, I love feeling joy and happiness, uh, but that's not how life works. And so one of the things that I think is a really good way to self-improve around our thinking and how we're experiencing our own inner dynamics and our relationship to ourselves is when we experience a more uncomfortable emotion, to observe it and to objectify it, remembering that Uranus is still in Taurus and is going to be ruled by that Venus in Virgo. So objectifying that in order for something to transform. Um, I can give an example. During my Saturn return, I was a raging bitch. Like, I just have to say, like, I mean, the B word's not so nice, but I can laugh at myself. I was extremely angry. I don't think I'd ever experienced anger like that before. And it started spewing out into my very close relationships. And that was the thing that got me to be like, what is going on here? And what I discovered through my Virgo analyzing of my own inner dynamics in order to expand upon them was that I was experiencing massive amounts of grief that was unprocessed, and therefore I acted out in anger. And so I had to really start to process that. And so this is a way that you can start to utilize some of the more uncomfortable feelings in a Virgo-like way. When Virgo's not expressed naturally, though, it is going to get an analysis paralysis, rumination. It's going to stay in the loop and keep going over and over and over things, which sometimes can be not productive at all. It's what my dad growing up would call stinking thinking, where you just kind of stay stuck in a karmic loop is kind of how I view it. And so the best way is to create some type of action to start moving forward if that's happening, in order for the self-improvement to happen. Other dynamic I want to talk about with Venus and Virgo, Mercury and Virgo retrograde is we could be confronted with more of our masochistic tendencies of feeling victimized, or like in order to improve, we have to experience some type of crisis first, which is not true. I think a lot of people that have Virgo in their chart, definitely that's what gets them to improve at first. But throughout this transit, I just want you to, both of the transits, Mercury retrograde, Venus and Virgo, Mercury and Virgo retrograde, is I want, if we're meant to emotionally mature further as an act of self-love, to continue this ongoing journey that we've seen through the totality of these new and full moons recently, is I want us to stop and pause, not only when we're feeling something uncomfortable, but are you avoiding something? I want you to objectify that. Are you avoiding something? Because if you continue to avoid something, that is when crisis happens. And there's nothing more uncomfortable than life blowing up in front of your face and realizing like, oh, that could have been negated had I gone with the flow of life and not resisted what it is or what it was that I was meant to be learning. So all of these dynamics could be coming up at this time. I find it immensely healing, a healing time. I know I'm talking about some of the more kind of negative things, but I I'm a straight shooter. This could be very lovely, but life has its ups and downs. And with the Venus and Virgo and Mercury and Virgo transits, it's wanting us to self-improve, and that can be pretty damn uncomfortable sometimes. And so that is the point that I'm trying to make. Going with it and really looking within during this time is helping set that new moon off as an act of self-love, as an emotional maturation process, as standing in one's own authority, not having to ask someone, what should I do? It's more about like, no, what should I do? Like, to yourself, and really utilizing that to analyze and to intuit and to take the clues in your life, the synchronicities, right? Oh, this keeps happening, or oh, this, I keep experiencing or feeling this emotion. Start to objectify it and analyze it in order to self-improve, to become more self-reliant, and to be more of your own authority in your life. So this is your weekly forecast. Tomorrow, I am going to post a video that I did with my beautiful friend B for her astro school about a month or two ago, called A Return to Natural Law, where I go over, I have so many of you guys in session, what is natural law, or what is this, what is that? This video really goes over what natural law is. It's a small lecture I did. And at the end, B asked me some really great questions. B is autistic. We're both neurodivergent. And so she asked really great questions revolving around that, and also how to work with this energy. And I also am going to go over a few of the transits that really reflect that this is a time for us to return to natural law instead of more of this kind of, as the people I hear say, lower vibrational energy, this heaviness that's within the collective. So I look forward to seeing more of you in my, well, I would say office, but I'm in my kids', I don't know, playroom right now. And I'm having some work done on my house, but I look forward to seeing some of you on Zoom over the next couple of weeks, and I just got finished with my karmic inheritance workshop. That's another reason why I took a little break. And I will be starting a new workshop up after October, and that leaves me with telling you the last thing. I am speaking at the annual Evolutionary Astrology Conference that is happening in the beginning of October. I believe it's October 3rd through the 6th, if I'm correct. And there are many wonderful astrologers who are going to be giving lectures um, about many different subjects through the lens of evolutionary astrology. My lecture is going to be over the archetype of Cassandra. It is titled Cassandra, Can You Hear Me Now? And it is revolving around not only this archetype, but how to see it play out in other people's lives, and what it means in regards to your own personal relationship to self, and regaining your own inner voice and your outer voice and your own inner knowledge. I'm really looking forward to this class. I absolutely love this asteroid. Um, and if you want to sign up for that, I believe that there's an early bird special going on, and the coupon code is early bird. And you can go to jwgaea.org and sign up for the conference. It's online, or you can just purchase my lecture if that's what you want, or you could purchase other people's lectures, or you can purchase the whole pass, the conference pass. It will be online. These will be recorded. You can have them. You don't have to be there. Of course, we love you being there. You don't, you can watch it later if you want. And I think that's it. And I will see you all soon. Have a good week and happy Leo new moon. Get out there and have some fun and play and stand in your own authority as an act of self-love.